what we do is um, we will, just kind of maybe time travel. Just, think of, how things kind of started off. I don't know if you need it, but I think we got that one slide. Um, which was that? Okay, so maybe can you see this slide? I think just to kind of, just to recap our memory.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, if we can hear, just a summary where your A1C was, and then how I think we noticed about 25 to 50% drop in the insulin resistance. Our main goal was A1C reduction, and then a little bit of, reversing that course from uncontrolled diabetes to control to even up to pre-diabetic phase. And then how did the weight change? And I think any metrics that we talk about, especially, we dropped about 50 to 60% medication. So with that in mind, let's see. I know you have very passionate about the physiology and how the body works, but what was that, Nikhil? And to just give us an idea, how long you've been diabetic before you even learned about our program, and how was the course then? And what made you think of actually giving it a shot, trying something of this nature?
Sure. So I have been a diabetic for about a little over 18 years.
Mm.
And so I had reached a stage very recently last year where I was on about the highest dose of metformin plus two more medications uh, to manage my diabetes. And the HbA1c was at that time around closer to 9 rather than 7.9, but it was
Mhm.
about 9. And then I took a decision to actually register, explore options which does not put me on medication and eventually on insulin for life. And that's where I saw a couple of ads from New Me Health on Facebook as well to say that it is potentially reversible and things like that. So, and I also looked at a few videos of some other physicians in India and otherwise uh, who are helping with some of these reversals. So I got excited because I was looking for some local help like within San Antonio. So, and that's where I met Dr. Boja. So, and the journey
Sounds
started. So,
I see. Fantastic, fantastic. In other words, yeah, so that's been a long struggle. And with, as I heard, two or three medications still going on for, 10, 15, more than that years. Okay, so I think, yeah, yeah. So basically, you were looking for some better solutions, and I'm glad we found us. And what was your discovery? So when we joined the program, was there anything that fell on the same lines as you were hoping it to be, or was it completely a surprise, or what were the elements that made you, kickstart?
I think the first interaction that I had with you, Dr. Boja, where you really walked me through the principles of reversal holistically, beyond dependence on medication and the future, if you don't take care of the diabetes. So that was very impressive. I like the balanced approach that you shared, and it kind of resonated with some of the other videos that I had seen on YouTube, but not experienced anything on in real life. And so I was also inspired by some of the case studies that you shared, like with other patients. So that made me really sign up. Although I felt initially it was a little expensive, but then I really thought about it and said that it's really an investment for life. And so the more and more I thought about it, I thought this is like an opportunity to get like a life skill to manage health rather than manage a condition. So
Makes sense.
that's what
Makes
made
sense. Yeah,
me sign up. Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah. So, yeah, I like the way you put it. Actually, so you're right. So, I mean, this is an investment for life, and it's a life skill that we learn because this is one of the yeah, a spectrum of metabolic diseases that are lifestyle driven. Excuse me. And so lifestyle has to be the solution, which doesn't stop, in a day or two. Fantastic, fantastic. Then, so what were I think we had the one of the elements that are actually kind of making our patients successful in a very short period of time, rather than waiting for years to see the change. And I'm pretty sure you experienced it in a matter of weeks and months. Speak to me about the monitoring, the technology that we had when we use the tools we use, remote patient monitoring for your weight and your fitness and body composition, and continuous glucose monitoring. How did they help you to kind of stay on track and give that real-time feedback to reinforce your positive changes?
Yeah, I think I come from the management consulting field, so there is a very important saying is a statement there which is you cannot improve what you cannot measure. And thankfully, the way you have structured the whole ability to look at sleep patterns, exercise, diet, the actual impact on all of these components on CGM, the regular blood pressure, all the important metrics that are required to continuously track. I think some of the apps that I liked was not just the CGM, but all this data coming in one app. I think that is what is really missing. In fact, that was really motivating because I looked at all the things and it became like a self-motivated target for me to manage my own condition. Because I could see the readings more frequently. Secondly, what I loved about the program so far is every week. One was this I was monitoring, but I also loved the fact that the technology was used to send me messages if I did not record, any readings, and or if there was some, and every follow up, right? We went through a lot of clinical way of dissecting each reading, how it is moving week by week or month by month in every appointment. And that is what I really loved. And more important than that, the way you explained, let's say if the blood pressure was 140 and all the lifestyle changes that were recommended, how that is actually impacting the reduction in readings. So I loved the fact that there was technology that was used for continuous monitoring, periodic evaluation, it was all connected,
Mhm.
and the cause and effect, right? I could relate to that very nicely in every meeting. So I think that kind of also motivated me to stay on course, to say, oh, well, this works. So maybe I should lift weights or whatever, right? Not eat fat or so on and so forth. So um, that became like a self-oiled machinery, right? Tracking, measuring, improving. So that's what got
Absolutely.
me into.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I think, yeah, as you are a person of technology, and now I think there are so many tools and apps and devices that we use in life. But yeah, that's one of our core missions. If these technologies are not helping to improve our health, what good are they, designed or meant for? And then the challenge in the current practice is they're not part of the integral part of the health management or the disease management. I'm glad they worked out really good. As you said, it's the machine or the tool or the app that is giving you the real feedback. It's not an individual like me or my other team members. So no one is actually trying to kind of preach us, teach us, brainwash, because you're seeing yourself, how your body's objectively responding. And then when you get the results back, I think that puts you in a positive reinforcement loop. Fantastic. I think we're very glad to hear that. Let's talk about some of the nutritional elements. I know the diet and exercise, core components of the lifestyle change. We heard that many years, and everyone knows, right? Practically speaking, we all know there got to be something improved in diet and exercise, but nowadays there is no shortage of information. We go online, you can learn a lot. But what was that made you really understand the details of the nutrition or the food, and then how were you able to link it up and then kind of learn over the time to improve your sugars?
Sure. So, so when I signed up for the program initially, we did this survey called Four Leaf Survey, which
Hmm.
kind of documented where I was, right, in terms of my eating patterns.
Hmm.
And what I liked it is it had very clear breakdown by food categories and what I should be, what's the ideal state from where I was. So that motivated me to keep tracking and minimizing the should nots and maximizing the should haves. So that helped me actually, and I managed to even, not that I was a frequent meat eater or non-vegetarian eat person, but
Mhm.
I completely went off it, was fully into plant-based diet for more than 6 months, more than 8 months. And then I saw the changes in my readings, sugar control, and yeah, that was one. And then also there was an initial booklet that was handed out to say glycemic index and food types and food sequencing, some of those hacks, apple cider vinegar, lemon water before and heavy carb meal or whatever else. And as I followed those guidelines, I started seeing phenomenal changes in terms of reduction in the A1C, reduction in the CGM readings, etc. And most importantly, even like post meal spikes started coming down. Things that used to be way beyond 200. The post
Mhm.
meal, within 2 hours, it came down to less than 140 very regularly within a couple of weeks, which never happened in the past. So, so I think developing that understanding of which food is impacting my particular body type and on the sugars helped me a lot. And then once I got a good understanding of the macronutrients, micronutrients, in interactions with yourselves and uh, the nutrition expert as well, then I started exploring, how I could actually still achieve the same results by keeping the taste and removing the waste, as I call it, which is not, keeping the taste intact but removing the wrong things from the food. So that led me to research newer elements to say what is high in protein and less in fat and whole foods and so on and so forth. So that really has become a life skill now. So in every meal, I make sure that I have to start with a salad or some sort of a fiber. I look at a plate and then mentally now calculate. And thanks to you, like it's become a life skill, almost like a second nature, that I
Mhm.
can look at a plate and say, "Oh, this is not going to be good for me." So I ignore what I don't need now. So that's become like that's a good foundation of life skill, I think, for us.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I think, yeah. I mean, when you go out to kind of, let's say fast food, you're driving through, they always ask you what kind of fries you want, what kind of sandwich, and what kind of drink you want, right? So, it is so embedded, ingrained in our minds, that when you get a meal, so-called, especially speaking in Western meal pattern, there got to be some kind of fries and some sandwich or and a meal, core meal, and with the drink. So no one questions that format. But I think what I'm hearing is, yeah, the similar approach to the plate, whatever you're eating, depending on our cultural practices. So yeah, having those greens and vegetables and the core meal, and looking at your carbs and the source of your fat and the protein, and then what kind of mitigation strategies you use, like lemon water or apple cider vinegar, or what you do after the meal as well. So
Yeah,
fantastic.
and one big thing that I learned, doctor, personally for me is fiber is a carb. And
Mhm.
this whole nutritional value information is so misleading because it never mentions carb.
Mhm.
And most of the guidelines say 60% carb, but nobody says out of which how much it should be fiber. So it's not good enough to say you can eat 60% carb bread. Uh, at least, so what I have started following now, and that was a big learning and shift for me, is that fiber needs to be at least a 50% of the carb, at least for me now.
Mhm.
Mm. And that takes care of, a lot of problems.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, we always, 1 to 5 ratio. That is 20% of the carbs should be fiber. But if you take it to, yeah, that 50% so-called, and that's what we recommend. Yeah, fiber is the one of the secret ingredients that actually shifts the physiology. Sounds good. So at the end of the day, so what was your journey like? Meaning, in terms of your daily average sugars that you used to see versus you see now. And then what was your starting A1C? And then now, is that with more meds or less meds? Let's kind of hear in terms of daily average sugars or maybe post meal sugars. A1C and the medication change over time?
Yeah, so when I started off the program, it used to be A1C was around between 9 and 10 when I
Hmm.
started off. And that's where my, traditional medical doctor put me on those five medications of sorts.
Hmm.
And that brought it down to the 8 and 7.5 range when I started the program. And once I started following the guidelines of the program, specifically diet, exercise, and the new thing that I discovered was sleep and stress, right? I think more importantly, also the third factor that I've discovered is also sleep. So it moved when I followed all these things, right? It moved from like nine upwards, I mean 5 tablets to I think within 3 months it went down to just the metformin. So
Hmm.
all the additional pills were off the table. Secondly, uh, my A1C had dropped to like under 7 within 3 months. And so that stayed over a period of time, that stayed well below 6 as well. And even today, after the completion of the program, like I said, it's become almost like a life skill. So whether I have CGM or I don't have CGM, or whenever I apply it randomly, I have managed to, I always try and keep it below 6 for the most part naturally, by having learned these life skills, right? Exercise and diet and sleep patterns. So now it is about under 6
A1C.
A1C. And
Mm.
with medications like just on metformin, even the metformin dose was 1000 mg when I started, and that also has come down. So it's just two for into 850, and that's it. That's the only medication I take.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so already, um, yeah,
And
um,
what I like about this whole change, right? Personally, a big win for me is, yeah, it was 16 years you had diabetes, right? By usually a person gives up on having to ever change that situation. And
mhm,
I think this program really instilled confidence back uh, to say maybe you should be self-motivated. Let's see if give it a shot, right? To why not? And so so all these things, right? Continuous monitoring, the feedback and guidance from the program, right? uh, just multiplied the motivation to take control of it myself, right? At times, and then it turned into a life skill, really. So all these changes, right? It was very difficult initially for the
mhm,
first month or so.
mhm.
You had to give up the food that you loved, no sweets, no desserts, and all of that. So it took me between 3 weeks to 4 weeks to really shift that, right? I was no longer craving for things that I was dependent on when I started the program. So all that kind of reversed permanently. So even
Okay.
if I have cravings now, I know
Mhm.
what how to manage them in the sense like what to do before, what to do after, so that the spike doesn't happen.
Were you able to reintroduce some of the food that used to spike pretty, you know, right away, like notoriously, spiking? Were there any foods that you saw any difference in the amount of the spike and then how long it used to last versus now?
Yeah, I think there is a definitive change. The spike used to last like 4 or 5 hours if I had the traditional fried puris in the past. So now it does go up, but it doesn't last like 4 hours. It comes down within 2 hours,
Mm.
and thankfully, it does come down well below 142 after 2 hours, which never happened in the past. And 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 if I do even do a little bit of 10-minute walk or exercise, even after having those heavy carb heavy meals, I'm able to still achieve the same result, right? Bring it down below 140, even if I go a little extra on the carbs. But for some reason I just don't do carbs anymore, I mean blindly.
Right, right. Good. Yeah, I think you learn the strategies and the tricks. It's not that we never need to eat or we should never eat the carbs or we've been eating carbs for generations. It just it changed the way it was presented in our foods or shows up in our food plate right now. Finally, let's kind of give a little touch to the exercise part.
Yeah.
What were your surprises or discoveries and how? the exercise element has changed your insulin resistance or your glucose response?
Yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I was living with the assumption that walking is good enough to maintain sugars, and yeah, that you could still do that, right? But what I found
Mhm.
is walking or any other form, right, like running or jogging and so on and so forth. Yes, it brought the sugar down for some time momentarily, and it kept it low. But then you really dependent on walking or running or doing that activity every day so that it stays at that level. So, and then you introduced me to something called as strength training. And I did, as a curious learner, I did my own experiments with it to say if I only walk, what happens after a meal, or only lift weights, or climb stairs and by lifting weights, right, holding weights in my hands and so on, and various combinations. What I found is strength training on its own
Mhm.
sustains that control of even like early morning glucose much lower.
Mhm.
So it is a
Mhm.
much long lasting impact than walking or general activities that I thought are enough to keep the diabetes in check.
Excellent.
So I think strength training has been my biggest learning, and I do that, and I can see like if I have eaten overeaten in a given meal from time to time, not really regularly, but I can see the impact, right? If it goes to 180 after a meal,
Mhm.
just lifting weights and doing something which is squats or chair squats, or as simple as sitting down, getting up, sitting down, getting up like 100 times, it brings it down to like 80. And the surprising element is it does not go back to 180 again, never,
Absolutely.
right? It goes up to 120 and then
Mhm.
stays very stable around 100 for 2 3 days. So
Absolutely.
so that's the impact, I think. Strength training, and I think you had discussed that also, to say the how the glucose is used by the muscles. I think that is going to make a huge difference to manage it long term.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a clear physiology or the mechanism how and why it works. I think you put it to rest, and you actually the good thing, nice thing about the strength training compared to cardio is, yeah, it has a long lasting impact beyond goes beyond 24 hours and beyond because you're changing the quality and quantity of your muscle function and mitochondria. So fantastic, fantastic. All right, so let's look at that. People have a fear that when I start something, I need to kind of buy, lock myself down in a cage. I can't go out. I can't go to vacations. It's hard to survive other places. What was your experience? Because there's one of the reasons why we designed it as a 6-month program is to so that you can actually you're bound to expose or go out of town, out of home. How did what was your experience and how did you handle, or actually you learn anything from your vacations or out of town travels or trips?
Yeah, for sure. So I indeed had a lot of vacations in between in the 6 month window, or even overseas travel. And but I think within 1 month, once I got the hang of what I should be doing and should not be doing, so even during travel, I found options and alternatives, right, to make sure that I was following those rules. And uh, surprisingly, even if you were at a beach or a mountain or hill station, as long as you know your mind tells you what is good and what is not good, fortunately there are options available in on the places today, right? So you can stick to fiber. Yeah, you can have a cupcake from time to time, but you know when to have it, how frequently to have if you're on vacations, and what to combine that with so that you don't spike the sugar. So I learned it that way. So I in fact traveled to India, which is known for a lot of carb centric meals throughout the day. So but I was able to balance all that with fiber, and reduce all the bread and rice and substitute that with salad and grains. So
Excellent, excellent. Well, so finally, let's wrap it up, Nikhil. There are a lot of people who are on the fence, and of course, unfortunately, diabetes has become a household condition, either pre-diabetes or diabetes. Either we are struggling or fighting, or afraid of flipping from pre-diabetes into diabetes. But still, people are lost and hesitant to try anything other than medications, even though they don't like it. What would you say for people who are looking into some kind of, holistic approach like this, under medical supervision? There is a medication management, your labs, and objectively under physician supervision, and with real-time feedback. What would you say to those who are actually thinking of or being, still on the fence to see if this is going to be a worthwhile program to even to try?
It is completely worthwhile. I think not is it's not just about avoiding the complications or avoiding excessive medication and eventually insulin, all of that. That's going to the extreme. But the lesson here is it's an opportunity to really understand that your health, right, is your responsibility. And I think that's what the program really taught me. And beyond just the effects of medication and the extremities, right? What I also found was a lot of people started complimenting me for the change that they were able to see in me. So that became a good motivation in itself, where you started looking better, you started looking healthier, and you started actually motivating people who are struggling with it but are non-diabetic. Even they started trying to understand what are the good practices they can follow so that they can prevent it in the future. So I think beyond medications, the real impact was in the self-confidence, and people even start respecting you because it's a sign of you can be self-motivated and you demonstrate that, right, with evidence of change in how your physiological structure is, how you communicate, all of that. So I think the major change is self-improvement through health improvement. That's how I think I would see it, rather than just
Fantastic.
medication prevention.
Excellent, excellent. I think, yeah. So you basically, yeah, you're walking what you're learning, walk that same walk, and you become, say, living proof for yourself and others. And the biggest thing is, especially when we're, fighting this disease called diabetes, self-motivation and meaning self-esteem is what actually gets, eroded over time, because we can constantly see losing the battle to control the sugars, and then you become kind of, hopeless that, I don't know where, these fluctuations are coming from. I don't know which,
Yeah,
what to control and change. So, and then instantly you get these results, and then you become, positively reinforced. And yeah, building the self-esteem and confidence, and then exactly what your body is asking for. You begin to learn to listen to your body, in other words, right?
absolutely. You listen to your body. One impact, obviously, is once you start doing that, you start doing the right thing on the physical body. But that has a far more amplified effect on your mental confidence and
Mhm.
conviction and how people perceive you. So it's for me, it is like it's nothing to do with only health. It is really about self-esteem, like you rightly said. And so, and the other thing that I learned is people misunderstand this to be a program only if you have a condition called diabetes.
Mhm.
I think what this changed is, uh, I mean, I don't want to be so technical, but I think the cell function, as the experts would call it, so that
Mhm.
altered so many other things, not just whether you have a diabetes or a thyroid or a XYZ. It changes everything. So I
You got
would,
it. I think, and I'm actually, proud of you for that, Nico, because again, you're an avid reader, and then, kind of very curious person. Even though you're not coming from the medical field, you rightly summed it up. In other words, even though our own program, we call it Defeat Your Diabetes, it's a diabetes-centric program. We take it as actually as a working tool, or a working main dominant condition that you can see, feel, and see the changes in terms of numbers and metrics. But as you rightly said, the impact, the all these changes, and meaning, the health education that happens and the coaching that happens to your nutrition and lifestyle changes, the benefits go beyond sugar control. Even though you say, no, I need to just kind of walk and do some exercise to, you're trying to kind of bring your sugars under control, but that's the tip of the iceberg. That is a visible metric that you're trying to address. and the ripple effect goes beyond, far beyond that. It changes the muscle physiology, change the cardiovascular function, changing your insulin resistance and changing your inflammatory markers and all the endothelial, the blood, how the blood vessels and everything else works. Because as we noticed, every single patient just like you, fatty liver reverses, kidney function improves, neuropathy changes, and then your blood pressure is changing, inflammatory markers, and we have a cardiac, right, heart attack risk markers, and your heart age is improving, your fitness age is improving. Absolutely. In other words, we can be rolling out this program to kind of go far beyond diabetes to PCOS and heart disease and autoimmune disease as well, with some specific interventions for them. But thank you. Thanks for sharing your experiences. Obviously, we are proud of you. As you rightly said, this is not just limited to 6 months, but what you learn in these 6 months will become a lifelong, life skill forever to continue to work on. We appreciate your time and sharing your experiences.
Thank you so much. I have become thanks to the program, now I'm a handyman of health.
So, what do you mean? What do you think of? I mean, what do your family or friends think about who you are right now? Your new me, Nikhil.
Yeah, completely new person. Like I said, handyman for health. So if anyone needs any help, they just call me and say, I should have this curry with something else or what. So
There you go.
it's
Well,
like,
maybe we'll have a little session, around that. The things that you frequently hear, and then can you make your suggestions to your friends? But
yeah,
yeah, you passed.
especially what I found, doctor, is there's a lot of science on the macro and micronutrients in a clinical way, in the sense you need
Mhm.
magnesium, you need calcium, and all of that. I think where the industry wants may really benefit, and at least I have learned it the hard way, is translating that into a cuisine, a
Mhm.
cultural format, right? So
Mhm.
if it is if I'm a Mexican culture, Indian culture, how do I translate all these good habits into my food? I think that's the
Right.
journey that I really went through really well. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for here, saying that, because that's one of the philosophies as well. Clinic. Myself. And I teach my staff as well, my dietitian and everybody else. So we unfortunately we have to take our professional hats off. Meaning, this clinic, we come in, we work with you and then every other patient. Differently, because if I speak the same physician technical jargon and terminology and the description, I don't think that translates into a real life applicable instructions. Same is true for my dietitian too. Typically nutritionist dietitian, they speak in terms of percentage, x amount, x grams of proteins and carbs, you got to balance this and this, because I think that doesn't take us to further enough. Life is not about chemistry. Life is not about doing the math all the time. But you have to translate into what are your common and frequently used ingredients. And I love the way you actually came up with that idea of keep the taste and then drop the waste, right?
yeah, yeah,
Meaning you don't have to give up certain things because they're not healthy and get stuck with some things that are, meaning the recipes that are not palatable, that you don't enjoy. Because we eat not just for the nutrition, but it has to be entertaining, it has to be tasty and then joyful. But in that process, we introduce so many unhealthy options that just entertains our taste buds. But now you're actually bringing it back to, no, you can have some tasty stuff, right?
yes.
Without a negative health impacts. Extraordinary. Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you
on
so
this.
much, doctor. Yeah,
Yeah, you have a good one then, and then we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
thank you so
Bye
much. Yeah, bye bye.
bye.